A very good evening. You're watching India Global with me, Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's kickstart the show with headlines this evening. First up, President Trump's golden ticket offer to the uber-rich. Donald Trump now says that you can buy U.S. citizenship at $5 million, replaces the earlier EB-5 visa system, where the ticket size for buying citizenship was about $800,000 US. Mahakumbh, the world's largest spiritual gathering, comes to an end as crores of people take a holy dip on this auspicious occasion of Shivaratri. Bangladesh Army Chief is now at loggerheads with Mohammad Yunus, comes out with a very stern warning, says that polls must be held now, and he also says that it is the student leaders who are accountable for the complete anarchy in Bangladesh. Washington, Kyiv agreed to terms to the critical minerals deal. United States drops demands for right to $500 billion in potential revenues. All eyes now on the Zelensky-Trump meeting that is expected to take place at the end of this week. President Trump to convene first cabinet meeting tonight. The special government employee Elon Musk is also set to attend. Here's the big story we are tracking on India Global. In fresh trouble for Bangladesh's interim chief Mohammad Yunus, the army chief of Bangladesh, that is General Waqaruzzaman, has now warned him to not delay polls any further. And he's even blamed the infighting for deteriorating law and order situation in Bangladesh. He has said at an army memorial event, the army chief warned that the ongoing political slugfest was allowing miscreants to thrive. He said that with some believing they could act with impunity against this chaos that is unfolding in Bangladesh. Zaman's remarks came as differences grow within the student groups that forced former Premier Sheikh Hasina out of office last August. Divergences are now coming to the fore between the caretaker administration and political parties over holding of elections. Nahid Islam, who was one of the key orchestrators of the August 5th protests, is also now set to launch his own political party, one that is set to be backed by Jamaat-e-Islami. Now, what does this mean for Bangladesh in terms of the political uncertainty that lies ahead, the big warning that has come in from the army chief? Let's first listen in to a soundbite coming in. We come back and talk more.
আমরা নিজেরা ভেদাভেদ সৃষ্টি না করি, আমরা নিজেরা ইউনাইটেড থাকি। আমাদের মধ্যে যদি কোনো সমস্যা থেকে থাকে, কোনো ব্যত্যয় থেকে থাকে, কোনো গ্রিভান্সেস থেকে থাকে, সেটা আমরা আলোচনার মাধ্যমে সমাধান করব। এটার জন্য ডানে বায়ে দৌড়িয়ে কোনো লাভ হবে না, নিজের ক্ষতি ছাড়া কোনো লাভ হবে না। আমি আপনাদের এই জিনিসটা নিশ্চিত করে দিচ্ছি।
Okay, that was the army chief and his big warning. Viewers, there are several questions that I'm now posing in terms of what lies ahead in Bangladesh. The first key question, what is really stopping Mohammad Yunus from holding elections? This is an interim government. It came after the 5th of August uprising, and almost 7 months it will be. There is no update on when those elections will be held. The second big question, is Yunus facing now pressure from his aides to hold elections? Remember, the Bangladesh army chief is a man on his side. He's been rallying support for Yunus. There are members of the BNP who are saying hold elections. So is he now facing pressure from those who are favorable to the Yunus dispensation that elections must be held? And the other key question, is there now a growing wedge between the army chief and Mohammad Yunus? The army chief made it very clear when he said that the anarchy is because of the present dispensation. Where does the buck stop? And who is responsible for this anarchy is the key question. Let's get in Yashab Osama Rehman, who's joining us, who's in fact at the Business Standard, and Manjeev Singh Puri, former ambassador, with me on the broadcast. Ambassador Puri, let me start with you. These are very stern comments that have come in from the Bangladesh army chief, essentially setting the stage for possibly some sort of an update coming in on the elections? Is that how you see it?
Gaurie, thank you very much. You know, I like the way you put all of this. I would say something a little different. You know, when this criticism happens on Mr. Muhammad Yunus and the interim government, then in some senses, the stain of all that also falls on the army chief, because the general belief is that, you know, he is the general behind it all. Now, in a sense, he is kind of distancing himself from all of that. But at the same time, he's also warning the people that, look, it isn't so simple. It was perhaps, in a sense, I would say simple, but you were able to bring about a change in the government. But taking this forward is not such a simple matter, and all of you, you know, get your act together. Look, one of the things I liked in all of this is that there is a pushback against the Jamaat. You know, even from the BNP, there's been a certain pushback against the Jamaat. It's not only the Awami League and its supporters who are pushing back. So all in all, if this results in moving things forward towards a free and fair election, then I think that's something which is a positive development. But we need to wait and watch and see what's happening. And I'm sure somebody who's inside Bangladesh and has a, let me say, a feel on the pulse of what is happening might be able to give us a better judgment.
Mr. Rahman, what's your reading of these comments that have come in from the Bangladesh Army Chief?
I think when you look at the comments the Army Chief is making, they're very interesting because you have to take into consideration the law and order situation in Bangladesh. The law and order situation in Bangladesh has been on a steady decline. It has been not on an improved stage, right? One of the key reasons behind this is obviously because after the fall of the Hasina-led regime, a lot of police officers had cases filed against them. We had questions being raised about the DGFI, the NSI, our intelligence wings as well, right? So the army also, in yesterday's speech, in fact, he mentions these things, and he says that this is something that does upset people when it comes to conducting their duties. It is a barrier for them to conducting their duties. If you look at the rate, I have the rates with me right now. If I could talk about thievery, burglary, murder, robbery, kidnapping, we have seen a spike in most of these rates, right? So I think mainly he's saying people should be united.
I get what you're saying, and it's very important. But the fact
Right.
is, and this is a question I put forth to both of you, which is that the army is not in the barracks. Bangladesh Army Chief has been at the forefront of all that is happening right now in Bangladesh. They've got sweeping powers just days after the revolt, unprecedented sweeping powers, and they continue to hold so. It's going to be 7 months since the revolt happened, and the fact that nobody's been able to bring the situation anywhere close to normalcy doesn't speak highly about the army itself.
I think, if I may interrupt, I mean, we are talking about an uprising which deposed someone who was in power for 15 years. So 15 years of corruption, you're not going to solve it in 7 months' time. And I think given the
Are you saying that it will be 15
have,
years of mayhem that Bangladesh is going to see?
Of course not. Of course Bangladesh is not going to see. We have never seen 15 years of mayhem, right? But there are periods of time when there is a lot of uncertainty. And I think to say that, oh, we need to get rid of all the criminals. Do you know, even till, I think yesterday, we had 1,638 arrests made, just yesterday. Do you realize 999 of these arrests came because of previous cases? These were people who were running scot-free for 15 years. Now they're all being brought to the book. Do you think they're not going to react to these situations?
Okay.
It's not a magic wand that I can wave and solve everything, no?
No, when, okay, the fact that the army has unprecedented powers and it has still been 7 months and Bangladesh is nowhere close to normalcy doesn't speak highly about the army. But I take what you're saying, and let me then get in Ambassador Puri on this as well. Ambassador Puri, what about the tone and the tonality of what the army chief was saying? Of course, he was speaking at an army event, so he had to, of course, put forth a certain imagery, and optics also matter there. But how do you read the tone and tenor in which he spoke, A, about the fact that the law and order situation has completely collapsed, and B, that elections ought to happen?
So, Gaurie, first, I must agree with you what you just said. Look, you know, armies worldwide have done this kind of stuff, and I don't blame the current chief because this was a situation caused as a result of something else. They promise good governance, and they like people to believe that they are squeaky clean, excellent, efficient, and really giving good governance to people. So when things happen, like our colleague, my colleague on the panel has just said, there is a spike in all kinds of criminal activities, etc. Whatever may be the reason, if you are the force in power, then the stain comes on you. And in a sense, in my understanding, he is trying to distance himself and say, look, guys, take some steps, putting a little bit of the pressure or a lot of the pressure on the government, which is led by Mr. Mohammed Yunus, no
Is
matter
it
what we know.
working? Is this
Yes,
pressure going to work, Ambassador Puri?
look, let's wait and see. One of the things we must remember is that the army is perhaps the backbone behind it all. So when they say all of this, at least to some extent, efforts to try and ameliorate the things at a political level might be taken up. But as I mentioned to you, look, let's be a little clear that it isn't just the Jamaat which is leading the stuff or the BNP with them, but you are seeing a certain amount of pushback against the Jamaat. And that's something also which is worth seeing. So, we have to wait and watch. What does this mean? What exactly is the thing? But the fact that he's saying is that he also realizes that his important force, which he's heading, people perhaps are not particularly illusioned anymore. And after so many months, a degree of disillusionment with that is setting in, which he has to try and set right.
Okay, Mr. Rahman, comment on the fact that is there now disillusionment that is coming in amongst the student groups, amongst those who felt that, change is on the horizon, but it doesn't look so almost 7 months down the line?
Right. So one of the biggest reasons, one of the biggest sources of disillusionment has always been that the students, they gave their lives for this movement, right? And one of the things that they really want is for justice to be ensured. And for justice to be ensured, I think one of their demands is that Sheikh Hasina should be brought to trial. Now, we are both aware that Sheikh Hasina is right now stationed in India, where she is being afforded all kinds of protection. So one of the key reasons for the disillusionment is that she has not been extradited, or the process there has reached a sort of stalemate. But at the same time, I must agree with you on certain points that there is a time frame. Even if I say that 7 months is not enough, there are rising calls for elections to be held as soon as possible. And in fact, Mohammed Yunus himself said a couple of weeks ago that he's looking for election by the end of December. This was something that the army chief also said yesterday, that we are looking for elections by December. And I think a lot of people in this country really want to exercise our franchise. We have not been properly able to in the past 15 years. So this is a good time for us to go out there, give our votes, and I think we're all looking forward to that.
Do you think there will be free and fair elections in Bangladesh, Mr. Rahman?
I mean, absolutely, there should be free and fair elections in Bangladesh. I feel like if you look at our election commission, the way it's set up right now, if you look at the reforms that are being discussed, one of the things you asked was, why is it taking so long? Because reforms still need to be done. And if I leave things as they were, then we may see a repeat of the situation that has been plaguing us for the past decade or so. And yes, right now I believe that there is every scope for a free and fair election in Bangladesh. But things change in an overnight.
Things really do, and I hope they change for the better. Finally, let me ask you this, Mr. Rahman, as we wrap this up very quickly. Ambassador Puri spoke about the fact that there is resentment in Bangladesh against mainstreaming radical Islamist elements, Jamaat-e-Islami being one. Is that an opinion you share?
Is there resentment? I mean, any kind of radicalism, I would be extremely, I find it distasteful, and I would be completely against any form of radicalism, be that a religious one or be that a political one. And I think that is a sentiment that is shared by the people of this country. We do not want radicalism in our borders. You can talk to some of our top leaders, you can talk to some top officials or politicians. They'll all say the same thing. Nobody wants radicalism, in their own homes. I mean, how would that
Okay, this is not about individuals, but it is about countries and how they move forward. But thank you so much, both of you, for joining me on this edition of India Global on an issue that I'm going to keep coming back to. But viewers, today, the bottom line on what's happening in Bangladesh is, well, Mohammed Yunus's government is now going to complete almost 7 months in power. An interim government being there for 7 months is long enough for it to actually have a roadmap for elections. But what happens when you come to power without a roadmap? What happens when you try and mainstream elements which are essentially fringe? What happens when you have the army not inside the barracks but on the streets? Well, unfortunately, viewers, what you have is Bangladesh, a situation that needs to now urgently come back to normalcy. And lastly, the army chief's comments about saying that the anarchy is because of everyone is him now completely washing his hands off the madness that has really unfolded in Bangladesh in the last couple of months. Minorities continue to be on attack, arrests continue to be made, and political targeting hasn't stopped as yet. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We'll come back with lots more news on the other side, including Mahakumbh, which comes to an end today on the auspicious day of Shivratri. All right, viewers, the Mahakumbh comes to an end today on the auspicious day of Shivratri. Crores of people have taken the holy dip. Numbers seem to range in the range of about 50 to even more. 50 to 60 crores is the kind of numbers that seem to be coming in. But either way, it's the glorious festival of faith, spirituality that's coming to an end. And my colleague Vasudha Venugopal is there joining me live from Prayagraj, braving the crowds, braving the winter and braving all that and more to give us a sense of how things are looking on the final day of Vasudha. Take it away, share with us what your thoughts have been and what it's like to be on Prayagraj on the final day of Mahakumbh.
Gaurie, Prayagraj Mahakumbh 2025 experience has been quite significant for me because it shows that while a lot of things about this country changes, a lot also remains the same. The kind of faith and devotion that a lot of people in this country have towards, what they think is dharmic is completely astounding because there is also a sense of collective oneness. People here come with no complaints even about Vyavastha. They're walking for 5 hours, 4 hours, and they take a dip in the Sangam and they feel quite elated. They feel they have been completely, blessed by God. One thing that everyone has in common is that they are extremely grateful to the police personnel here, that they've been extremely helpful in guiding them. Today, I sensed a sentiment of urgency in all the pilgrims who came here because today is the last day. Everyone wanted to take that dip as soon as possible. But there was a lot of discipline when it came to regulation of crowds. I have with me two special guests and I want you to also listen to their views. Dr. Chiragi and Dr. Kunal from Vadodara in Gujarat. And they're both doctors and they've come here, they've taken their dip. Dr. Chiragi, how was your experience and why did you feel the urge to come here with your husband?
Hello. Yeah. Okay, so everyone told me that, it's very dirty, it's very crowded, you will have to walk for longer hours and everything. Why do you want to go to such a place? You can go after the Mahakumbh as well. Why do you want to go right now? So everyone discouraged me, basically. I didn't see a single video or YouTube reel saying that the place was filthy, whatever. But my reason of coming here was spiritual, as well as our ancestors have, studied the planetary movements years before the science actually could find out. And for me, the reason is that my grandparents, when I was 4 years old, they brought me to take a dip in Ganga. And now they are no more, but now it's my duty. I am paying my debt I brought their photograph with me so that I can pay my debt to them. And
That's quite emotional and quite nice. Dr. Kunal, one word from you, sir.
This is the spiritual feeling for me, and so divine feeling means so much relaxing feeling after the dip in the Ganges. And the 144 years, after 144 years, this has happened. And now after 144 years, it will happen. So behind this, the science is there. So this is not only just about Astha and spirituality, it is also about science.
So two doctors here talking about balancing faith and science, and also very emotional, Dr. Chiragi here, talking about how her drive to come to the Kumbh was also driven by her grandparents. And Gaurie, we know that Kumbh is so much about continuity, ancestors, and the kind of timelessness that is associated with Indian traditions. Hence, there is a sentiment of emotions that is attached. And of course, the fact that it has come once in 144 years has added to the curiosity bit, which is why 65 crore people have come to Prayagraj in the last 2 months.
Absolutely. Mammoth, those numbers are, Vasudha. And thank you so much for getting us this conversation with those two Sanatanis, two believers. At the end of the day, it is faith, spirituality, technology, and belief all coming together at that Mahakumbh in those Maha numbers that you see on your screens. All right, viewers, now we turn our attention to the other big story, which is the European Commission President, who is set to be in India for continuing trade talks. Remember, the world is now starting on trade talks with a new vigor. Well, at some level, they are Trump-proofing themselves, and the European Commission, no less than the President, is going to be here over the course of 2 days to try and thrash out trade deals and also to focus on defense talks and technology cooperation between India and the EU. India's growing importance as a strategic partner is on display here. Mr. Modi and Ms. von der Leyen will co-chair a plenary session with bilateral meetings also planned. Discussions will also cover key areas, as I said, trade, technology, AI being the others. Remember, India is set to host the next AI Action Summit. The EU is set to roll back a series of environmental regulations as part of its deregulation drive to stay up with the United States and China. This marks a significant shift from EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's first term, which prioritized climate action. But with growing concerns over sluggish economic growth and with the looming threat of a trade war with the US under President Trump's America First approach, Brussels is now focusing on easing the pressure when it comes to burden on businesses. Major players like France and Germany, along with frustrated companies, are calling for lower energy costs and a more business-friendly environment. The European Commission is set to unveil a new set of packages for the same. Moving on, Indonesia and Apple have agreed on terms to lift the country's ban on iPhone 16s and could sign a deal as early as this week. Indonesia banned the iPhone 16 in October after Apple failed to meet requirements that smartphones sold domestically should comprise at least 35% locally made parts. Since then, Indonesia's investment minister has said Apple plans to invest $1 billion in a manufacturing plant that produces components for smartphones and other products. Besides this investment, Apple will also commit to training locals in research and development on its products, and this will be done through programs other than existing Apple academies. But Apple has no immediate plans to start making iPhones in Indonesia. Moving on to a story that many would find extremely outrageous, which is the video that President Trump put out on his Truth Social platform, which appears to have been created with generative AI. It's promoting something that President Trump spoke about earlier this month as well, which is to take over Gaza in its present state and to turn it around into some sort of a haven. Video shows, the one that has been made by AI shows that it's turning into a resort where there's also a Trump statue in golden, and also features him and Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu lounging on a beach. There's Elon Musk dancing on it as well. Dollars, in fact, coming in as well. A lot of people found this to be extremely tone deaf, given the fact that the plight of those in Gaza has been completely ignored, and also the fact that how will this changeover actually take place? Does it mean America coming and controlling the territory? On that note, a quick break. We come back on the other side with more. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Global. We now turn our attention to US President Donald Trump, who's in the news almost every day. Well, what he's now announced is a golden card to get US citizenship. It's, well, meant for the world's uber rich. making it easier for extremely rich people to go ahead and buy American citizenship from his so-called gold card. It will be costing $5 million. Remember, there are already mechanisms by which those who are affluent can go ahead and take citizenship in other parts of the world, something that around the world visa programs run. So US has such a visa program, which is the EB-5, but there the cap was $800,000, and there's a certain cap of the number of people who can be taken in that particular category. Well, President Trump has completely changed that rule. He's turned it upside down. He says it's not going to cost $800,000. It's now going to cost $5 million, which is why they're going to be gold cards, a currency and a color that President Trump really likes. Also, there will be no cap, unlike the EB-5 visa programs, where there's a certain cap of the number of people who can take this route every year. President Trump says there could be millions of people who could be taking the gold card route, and that he thinks could be his way of ending the deficit of the US. Very bold, strong move and directive as far as which way the immigration policies of America could in fact turn going forward. So we're going to try and dissect what this means for India, what this means for the new set of policies that America may come out with, and is it possible that there could be Russian oligarchs who could be qualifying for this golden card, and some very technically high-skilled people may not be able to make that cut. What's this story all about? My colleague Parmeshwar Bawa breaks that down for you.
Well, US President Donald Trump says he's open to attracting one kind of immigrant, people with money. In a major announcement, Trump and his Commerce Secretary have revealed plans for a brand new immigration program called the Gold Card. And this program would allow foreign nationals to buy legal residency in the United States for a hefty price, about $5 million. And it could replace the controversial EB-5 visa program, which has been criticized for years due to fraud and also a lack of oversight. But here's the catch. This is not just about investing in projects, it's about paying directly to the US government. Trump described the Gold Card as not just a route to residency, but as an upgraded green card, offering privileges beyond what the existing system provides. And yes, wealthy people will be at the center of this plan. But that's not all. Trump hinted that corporations could also purchase green cards for their top employees, including those with exceptional skills or educational backgrounds, essentially making this a fast track to citizenship for the best and the brightest, if they can pay up. Trump's Commerce Secretary, who has been vocal about the inefficiency of the current EB-5 program in the US, has called this new plan a much-needed fix, one that would create world-class global citizens, people who can contribute to the US economy and apparently fill its coffers. But what about the risk? Critics say this program could turn the US into a destination only for the rich, potentially sidelining the working-class immigrants who contribute so much to that country. Plus, there's no word yet on whether these gold card holders will be required to create jobs, which is a key component of the EB-5. And in a twist, Trump even floated the idea of selling up to 10 million gold cards as a way to reduce the national deficit, which is a move that could make waves across the globe. And yes, he even suggested Russian oligarchs might be eligible, causing an uproar over potential ties to controversial figures.
So you got to know what the story is all about. I'm now going to pose the big questions that hopefully we'll try and get answers to. First and foremost, will this turn US into a hub for oligarchs? Does it mean Russian oligarchs, Chinese oligarchs are really going to be the ones who would get easy access to American citizenship? Second key question, billionaire Trump is now wooing the world's super rich. What happens to those who actually contribute to the American economy? The ones in technology, the ones in STEM that America has for decades really been trying to get into its system. And thirdly, will this delay the process when it comes to Indians who are seeking green cards? Remember, those Indians who are in the line or in the queue for green cards are predominantly through the H-1B program and several other such highly skilled programs. What happens to those? Millions will enter through the gold card, but will the queue go longer for those waiting through the other routes? That's the question that we're going to put forth. Joining me is Dr. Shreya Upadhyay from the Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies, and we also have David K. Johnston joining me live from Washington. He's professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Let me start with you, Professor Johnston, how do you read this new day, new policy announcement by President Trump, this time around turning the entire EB-5 program on its head? That's being now changed by, well, a gold card.
Well, this is totally expectable from Donald. Donald likes people who have money, and he doesn't care much about their character. It would also be economically bad for the United States. There's a model at the school he went to, Penn, the University in Philadelphia, that shows that regardless of education, letting more people into the country creates the greatest economic growth, very substantial economic growth. Whereas Donald's proposing only to let in very wealthy people. And his language was very interesting and typical of Donald. He said he would sell these cards.
That indeed is very interesting because, you know, what you are hinting at is not just a flat $5 million fee. What you're hinting is probably that being a reserve price for some sort of an auction. Again, we are just sort of debating here and there is no clarity there. But Dr. Shreya, I want to ask you about the impact this has on India. Of course, you know, whoever is rich enough to buy the ticket price of $5 million will get access to a citizenship. But what about so many of Indians who qualify as being highly skilled, contributing to the American economy, to the growth engine? What happens to all of them?
Thank you, Gaurie. So definitely this does raise concerns for Indians who are awaiting the green card. Almost 1 million Indians are currently stuck in very employment-based backlogs. And if we see that Donald Trump is actually shifting from, shifting towards a wealth-based immigration model that favors business professionals over skilled professionals. But there are other alternatives available. EB-5, while it is currently, we don't know what will happen to it, but it still remains. There is also, O1 visa, L1 visa, and H1B visa for Indian tech workers. So there are alternatives, but definitely this can be a setback for a lot of Indian workers who are who have been in fact in line for 50 years.
So here's how I read it. Here's how I read it, Dr. Shreya. Again, I'm reading with a very preliminary information that is available to us right now. But here's my reading. President Trump is very clear that he wants to crack down on immigration. He's very clear that he wants to address his core MAGA constituency. At the same time, he's quite clear that he wants to get the rich folks in. So what this means is that those in the other categories could either find it tougher because the threshold may increase, or the waiting period could increase because the number of people right now itself 7% may shrink further because he's opened the other window, which is the uber rich window. Is that how you see it, Dr. Shreya?
Definitely, Gaurie, and there is still uncertainty when it comes to how the entire green card will work, how the entire golden card will work. There's still uncertainty. There are details awaited on processing, on vetting, and the entire long-term benefits are also very vague. Besides, there are also legal challenges to it. So we don't know whether the entire program will be, driven by Congress, or does it need congressional approval or not. But most importantly for Indians, it's a matter of affordability. So, a lot of the tech workers and the highly skilled workers may not be able to afford this, while this may actually work very well for the CEOs and the uber rich, even in India.
Absolutely, or anywhere in the world for that matter. There are two questions that I want to in fact get both your thoughts on, starting with you, Professor Johnston, which is first and foremost, are there any legal challenges possible on something like this? Because surely the team Trump would have done some basic vetting of this, right?
Oh, I wouldn't expect they've done any vetting of it. This is a very chaotic White House, and Donald is not a man who reads papers. He reads headlines. He doesn't read memos from the staff. If Congress passes this, then we can have that program. Congress could also block it. But this is part of Donald's movement to ensure that America becomes a country of, by, and for the super rich.
Indeed. Dr. Shreya, you want to comment on that? Do you see any possible legal hurdles to something like that?
There are definitely going to be lawsuits, and the Congress may not be on board with this decision. And so, definitely, it's a long way to how it will be implemented. Also, we need to understand that political rhetorics are very different from a lot of times what happens on the ground. So, as we all know, that Trump is trying to create a certain sensation, a news, a very transactional element to his a transactional narrative to his entire presidency.
Yes.
So, a lot of these, whatever is happening is based on that.
Indeed. And before I ask you about what this means for the economy, because there's no pressure to actually create jobs in this kind of a program, there's one thing I'm going to say, which is that before his inauguration, President Trump said very important comment, that one line where he said, and his team said, that every one of the nominees will get confirmed, you wait and see. And they did get confirmed, right? I mean, so that really sort of puts the political context in which we are having, this conversation, that, legal hurdles, possible blockage. One needs to remember that President Trump is at a very favorable position on all these parameters. But let me then ask you, Professor Johnston, on the fact that what about the downstream impact? There's no requirement to actually create jobs. All you need to do is just pay up front.
The existing EB-5 program required you to create at least 10 jobs. They were supposed to be in either poor or rural areas. There's been a fair amount of fraud in that program, and there's no reason to think there might not be fraud in Donald's new proposal. But if you want economic growth, you want to bring strivers in, people who have really worked to develop themselves, not people who already have a large amount of money and are likely, in a majority of cases, to be what economists call risk averse. They're not going to take risky chances that would create a lot of jobs, develop advances in science. It's strivers who build an economy, and Donald doesn't like strivers.
Okay, yes. Quick closing comments. Dr. Shreya, to you.
Yes. So I also want to point out that there are, these golden visas are common in UK and Spain and Greece.
Indeed.
But all of these
Australia
countries,
as well.
These countries are now realizing the downward trends of something like this, which can be used for fraud, which can be used for money laundering. It can drive up housing costs in cities. So all of these things, I don't think the administration has really given a thought into it, or maybe it does not matter to them. For us, for Indians, it's, our immigration currently, we are in news for our illegal immigration, and more than 350 Indians have undocumented Indians have been deported. And so immigration is a very polarizing factor when in the American domestic politics. And so all of these, news items that are there are basically targeting immigration at a certain level.
All right, we leave it there. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me on this edition of India Global. Well, is this going to be your golden ticket to get a US citizenship? Only time will tell. But on that note, we're slipping into a very short break. We come back with lots more on the other side. Stay with us. Watching India Global, we turn our attention now to the Ukraine and the US, who are set to reach an agreement over access to Kyiv's deposits of rare earth minerals. The draft deal expects the two countries to jointly develop Ukraine's mineral resources, including oil and gas, and sees the US drop demands for a right to $500 billion in potential revenue from the agreement. Trump says that the agreement offered Kyiv billions of dollars in aid and lots of equipment and military equipment and a right to fight. But the deal does not give Ukraine specific security guarantees, as per reports. Ukraine President Zelensky is expected to travel to Washington, D.C. later this week, where the critical minerals deal could be signed with the U.S. President Donald Trump.
It's true that President Zelensky is coming on Friday to meet with you, and is the mineral deal sorted out?
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal, very big deal. So what we're doing is now we're saying, look, we want to be secured. We want to get that money back. We're helping a country through a very, very big problem, a problem like very few people have had. Shouldn't have had this problem because it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen, so we have to straighten it out. But the American taxpayer now is going to get their money back.
According to reports, the final details of the minerals deal, including the amount of money that Ukraine will pay to the United States, are not yet known. At stake are more than 100 major deposits of critical minerals that Ukraine controls. They include titanium, lithium, uranium, and rare earths, which are used in many high-tech sectors. Now, what does this deal actually entail? According to a draft accessed by many media organizations, Ukraine would contribute to a fund which is half in its size of its revenues from the future monetization of natural resources. On the other hand, the US is expected to own maximum financial interest in the fund. So what does Ukraine actually get from this? The fund is designed in a way that would enable reinvestment of some revenues into Ukraine. However, the agreement lacks American security guarantees for Ukraine, something Zelensky has been pushing for a while. Lastly, in a big relief for Zelensky, the draft does not include the demand that Ukraine contribute $500 billion to a fund owned by the US. Reports suggest that both the US and Ukraine seem to agree to the deal. More details will emerge when Zelensky meets Trump later this week.
Now, Russian Foreign Minister has labeled discussions about a peacekeeping force operating in Ukraine after a potential ceasefire with Russia as empty talk. Speaking in Doha, Sergei Lavrov said the idea mooted in the past weeks by both Britain and France is aimed at nothing but further fueling the conflict and was a deceit aimed at allowing Ukraine to rearm itself. Lavrov said the move would draw Ukraine into NATO and totally destroy the rights of Russian speakers there. Remember, that's the Donbas region that Russia has been talking about again and again. Donald Trump said on Monday that he asked Putin specifically about the possibility of a peacekeeping force operating in Ukraine. The Russian leader reportedly said that he had no problem with it, in stark contrast to the Kremlin's messaging on the issue. Asked about the comments at a news conference yesterday, Kremlin spokesperson cast doubt on Trump's claim, referring to an earlier statement that such a move would be unacceptable to Moscow.
Макрон заявлял в Вашингтоне о необходимости срочного перемирия, ввода вот этих миротворческих сил, а потом, дескать, поговорим и о территориях, о судьбах людей, о других принципах урегулирования. Это лукавство. Нельзя идти на договоренность, которая нацелена на достижение одной единственной цели – снова накачать Украину оружием.
Donald Trump is set to hold his first cabinet meeting tonight since returning to office last month, aiming to push his agenda with most of his nominees now confirmed by Congress. Billionaire and Tesla CEO Elon Musk will also be attending this meeting as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, which has been working to cut thousands of federal jobs. Although Musk does not hold a ministerial position or have formal decision-making powers, the White House classifies him as a quote-unquote special government employee and a senior advisor to the president. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on officials to stay calm in the face of domestic and global challenges, signaling Beijing will take a measured approach to the Trump administration's new trade and investment restrictions. The comments coincide with President Trump taking his most sweeping actions yet against China in his second term, raising the risk that ties may soon worsen. The Trump administration has tightened restrictions on Chinese investments in key U.S. sectors like technology and energy, while pressuring Mexico to impose its own tariffs on Chinese imports. It's also pushing for fees on Chinese-made commercial ships, a move that is aimed at challenging Beijing's dominance in shipbuilding. Washington is also working on an even stricter semiconductor restriction program and rallying allies to toughen their position on China's chip industry, an effort that could slow Beijing's possible tech rise. These mounting tensions have already shaken global investors and sent Chinese stocks tumbling. New search for Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 has been launched a decade after the plane went missing in one of aviation's greatest enduring mysteries. The search, that's led by deep-sea exploration firm Ocean Infinity, comes just before the 11th anniversary of the plane's shocking disappearance on 8th of March 2014. The flight was en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, lost contact with air traffic control less than an hour after takeoff. Despite extensive international search efforts, the Boeing 777 carrying 239 passengers and crew has never been found. Previous attempts have not been able to recover the wreckage so far. All right, as we wrap things up, take a look at this slice of an interesting conversation I had with General Syed Atta Hasnain, who highlighted Pakistan's deep-rooted influence in Bangladesh as he spoke to me on our podcast, Spot On. Take a look. No, so you're linking Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
How are you linking that?
Absolutely. You see, subsequently, the speed at which the activities have taken place in Bangladesh, the military-to-military cooperation which has suddenly taken off, these things don't happen overnight. To my mind, Pakistan never left Dhaka, ever, even after 1971. They left behind enough agents, they left behind enough people who were in empathy and sympathy with them, who virtually acted as sleeper agents for the better part of the last 50 years, you can say.
Do you think ISI has active contacts with the radical elements in Bangladesh?
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. The ISI has always had contacts and has renewed and enhanced its contacts now. And I think there is an attempt being made to psychologically sort of surround us.
General Hasnain, a lot has been said in the last, decade or so about Pakistan, China becoming the two-front possibly for India, a two-front war coming in. Are we then looking at a three-front war possibility for India?
Yes, a third front could be possible. The Indian Army has got a concept when it does its training. We have an exercise enemy, a training enemy. The enemy on the Western Front is called Nark, the forces of hell.
Okay, yeah, Nark.
And we've got an imaginary enemy in the north. It's called Chandal, the forces of the devil. Right? So the Indian Army battles these two forces which are imaginatively kind of deployed. Do we have a name for Bangladesh? No, we don't.
Do we need to come up with one?
Because we never considered Bangladesh an adversary.
But do we need to come up with one now?
I don't think so.